Hey everybody, how y'all doing? How y'all doing? Morehead, Church of Christ, and everybody who's able to watch this. I decided to do the upload this video instead of do it live. I was midweek, and um, I did bring this up. I had prepared this lesson a while ago, but I was like, man, I want to go ahead and just I want to put it out there. You know, it's a two-part lesson. I thought it really is essential, really to our growth. So the whole point of this lesson is just kind of for us to help all of us grow spiritually. And I wanted to, like I said, make it two-part, put it upload for during the week, and that way we can have it, and then we'll conclude it on Sunday. So before we get started, I'm going to go to our Heavenly Father in prayer. As dear Lord, we come to you thanking you for your great mercy and your blessings that you've given to us and all the things that you've done for us so far this in the middle of this week. We ask you to continue to be merciful on our souls and keep us safe from danger, harm, and evil. I ask you, merciful Lord, to just forgive us for all of our unrighteousness, that you may hear our prayers. Watch over everyone, every family that's represented, every soul that's represented, Father, that hears this lesson, that you bless them, you touch their lives, and you work things out. All the small battles that we face, Father, be merciful, I beg you, Lord, and watch over and bless each and every one of us. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, so let's get on in here. Now, like I said, this is a part of a series. Just focus on the family. Brother J.R. Newsom, for anyone who's the new people, anybody who's new who's seeing this video. And I'm really excited about this one too, because this is, like I said, focus on the family. It's kind of a common theme, you know, it's like throughout different Christian lectureships and meetings and things like that, you'll hear the term focus on the family. And that's why I want to make sure that with this lesson, you know, we break it up into parts. So this first one is, like I said, we're doing male versus man, spiritual man versus the worldly male. All right. My inspiration really came from this from a writer, right? He's an author. He made a book. It's called Male versus Man. He's one of those guys. He's an actor, and DeAndre Whitfield is his name. And he's one of those guys that, you know, he did a lot of 90s TV shows and movies. And he's a guy, as you see his face, you'll know who he is, but he's not kind of a really memorable character. But anyway, his book was an inspirational book, and I thought it was really good. So I wanted to put it into a Bible lesson, right? So we can kind of take this on and just work on our spiritual growth, really. So we'll get started. I want us to go ahead and just jump in. So the reason why I also put that this lesson is not one that only is for men. And in a lot of cases, you will see a lesson like this that, you know, it'll be like a brothers type of thing, you know, just for the guys. And that's not important to do that, in my opinion, at this point, because I want to say this, quite frankly, doing it that way, in my opinion, has not helped a lot of spiritual growth for a lot of the brothers, really just throughout the whole, the faith, right? Throughout the faith, I mean, Christianity as a whole. I don't think it's really helped a lot of brothers to do so many brothers only lessons. So I wanted to make sure everybody was a part of this because, like I said, really we need our spouses and our children and people in our lives to really motivate us and help us to reach spiritual growth, especially as men in the church, right? As leaders in the household of faith, right? So I want us to go ahead. We're talking about being men of God, spiritual man versus worldly male, right? Man versus male. Well, I want to know, first of all, I want to make sure we get a good understanding of this. How do we recognize the spiritual men of God? The spiritual man of God, how do we recognize them versus the worldly male? Now, I'm telling you, listen, when I did this preparation for this lesson, man, I was shocking, disturbing to me that so many of these traits for the worldly male I lined up with. I was saddened by that because there's more research I did on this, and I was like, man, there's so many of these toxic worldly male traits that I have myself. I was like, man, that's not good, right? Because I want to be more in line with the spiritual man of God, right? That's the line. That's the traits I want to be lined up with. But I think the good thing about this lesson is, you know, we're going to grow from this. Everybody will. So to recognize the spiritual man of God versus the worldly male, we're going to start off finding out what is the worldly male. What does the worldly male look like? The worldly male, well, he looks to be served. That's the first thing. The worldly male looks to be served. Now, this to break this down, this is pretty simple. He wants to pretty much be on that throne, right? You know, we use that term nowadays, king, and that's my queen, or that's my king. We always use that term. It's a modern day term. You know, I call my wife, that's my queen. I say that, you know, and I feel like, you know, that's a fair thing, right? But that worldly male, he takes that to a whole new level. He wants to be served, and he really wants to be treated as a king. You know, he wants that treatment. And like I said, he wants to be served as a king. Now, the spiritual man of God is looking to serve others, right? That's the one thing we have to understand. That man of God, he's looking to serve others, because we ask ourselves, okay, why is he looking to serve others? Well, he wants to serve others because this is what Christ would have us to do, right? Christ would have us to serve others. So that spiritual man of God is going to be trying to follow Christ, the example of Christ, and he's going to be trying to serve others. That's what he's going to do. That's just how it works. So that's the first comparison contrast. Worldly male is going to be looking to be served, right? The spiritual man of God is looking to serve others. So we look at this. We look at the idea of, you know, how can we better ourselves? How do we better ourselves? How do we say, okay, I don't want to be this, right? I don't want to line up with that. I want to line up with that man of God. When we look at Christ, we look at the examples that Christ set for us. He set countless examples of us being of service, right? Being of service to our fellow brothers, to our fellow mankind, to our families. That because the focus of this lesson is about our families, really. It's about families, it's about spiritual growth. It's about doing things that are in line with the will of God. So we understand that those two parallels, right? Being like Christ, looking to provide service. How can we help you, right? Versus how can you help me, right? Because that spiritual man of God, he's a spiritual man of God. The worldly male, he's a boy, right? And what do we do for little boys, right? A little boy needs to have their juice box open for him. A little boy needs to have the bologna sandwiches fried just right? All that those little things, because the little boy, he can't get up there and do it himself. He can't get up there and get his own little lunch together. He can't, because he needs someone to do something for him all the time. That's what the little boy needs. But that's what the worldly male is like. He's like a little boy. Okay, he's not a man by the definition of what a man should be. So make sure you understand that. We also look at another comparison contrast I want us to show. The spiritual man of God, he sees the value in working together for the common goal. That's one thing he does. He sees the value of working together with people and their abilities. He sees that, right? So we're talking about now just the spiritual man of God. We're talking about in the workforce or in the family, all these things. The importance of knowing that there's value in looking at people who you are over, right? He can see it. I'm over you. I'm in authority, or I'm at the head. God placed the man at the head of the family. He sees the value of the rest of the family. He doesn't look and say, well, I'm the man, I'm the head of the house, and it's my way or the highway. That's not what the spiritual man of God does. Now, that worldly male, he takes his authority, his power, and he abuses it. He flexes it. His mindset is, it's my way or the highway. You don't like it? Hey, there's the door. Now, listen, I want us to understand, this is not an indictment on any individuals, right? This is an indictment on the fact that as a whole, as Christian men, we have to look to be better and do better. We really do. We got to look to do better and be better. And we got to look to break this old school mentality. That is the old school way. You go to any old school man, right? Their mentality is, hey man, look, I ain't got to explain myself to you. That's what it is. If I feel like you're weaker than me, meaning weaker than me as my spouse or my child or my employees or whatever, right? I don't explain myself to you. That's the worldly man. Because it's not about valuing the opinion or understanding of other people. It's about dominating, right? And pushing your control. And we see this a lot, obviously, with political figures. Some of them have that mentality. That's the way they like to lead. They like to lead by force instead of leading by, I like to call it the King Arthur mentality, right? King Arthur with the round table. The idea of the King Arthur situation was King Arthur had a round table because he didn't want to sit at the head of the table. He wanted to make sure he got everybody's opinion. And they were a better unit because of that. So I just want to look at that perspective. So we look at some other comparisons. Because it's all about comparison and contrast, so we can look at it and get a better idea of it. So the worldly male, he looks to justify bad behavior, right? That's another thing he does. He justifies bad behavior because, he has that mindset, hey, well, it is what it is type of thing, right? Well, I did this because it is, right? Instead of saying, listen, I know that my behavior is not acceptable, and I have to take responsibility for that. See, the spiritual man of God, he's looking to build stronger relationships, right? So he's looking to build stronger relationships. He's looking to make sure that stronger relationships are built based off of trust, right? And understanding, another point, that he casts a shadow. The spiritual man of God casts a shadow. And he understands that, listen, I am an example to others, right? I am an example to being, to be an example of God, to others. Some people will, your family, especially us men, we have to understand our families see God through our actions. And it sounds so crazy, but especially when kids are little, kids look up and they see their father, they see a man, whoever is the male in their family, the male in their family is looked at in some respects as the example of God. And it sounds crazy, and it's a lot of pressure. That's why so many guys are not present. Those guys, they don't want to be present in their families because they can't add up, right? So it's really difficult for that to happen for a lot of guys. So I want to make sure that we look at that in its full context and a full perspective of everything. So that's one thing that we want to make sure we see because it's important. It's important to see that. Now we're looking at some more things. So we're going to do some more comparison contrast to that spiritual man of God. Now, the spiritual man of God, he looks to find ways to make other people happy. That's what he's looking to do. He's looking to find ways to making other people happy. It is not about him, right? It is not about him. So as a spiritual man of God, he wants to make others happy versus looking to get himself pleased and satisfied. Because that worldly male, it's about being satisfaction, right? The old song, I can't get no satisfaction. That's literally the mindset of the worldly male. And we got to make sure we understand that it's about self satisfaction, self pleasure from others, right? So you want others to please you. You want to know, how can someone else please you? So let's put it in a marriage context, right? In a marriage context. So you have a man who says, well, you don't tell us, he tells his wife, well, you don't do this for me. You don't do that. Well, what about when I need this and blah, blah, blah. That's just, his mentality is about what you're not doing for me. And it's not really one time where that worldly male is looking at, well, what am I doing for you? See, the spiritual man of God is looking to see, what am I doing for you? And that's one of those things, like I said, we want to make sure we see how God is really wanting us to act, right? How does God want us to act when it comes to our families, when it comes to us men dealing with our loved ones? How does God want us to be? Now, we don't see these, there's total of 10 of these I've done. So we have 5 traits for that worldly man and 5 traits for that spiritual man of God. And if you can look at this, you'll see that these traits line up in the situation to where the worldly man of God, he, like I said before earlier, he's a boy. He is not, by definition, what a man is, because a man understands that you have to take responsibility. You have to be accountable for your actions. You have to understand that God wants us to have a certain strength about us. We look at 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and 13. And it says, be watchful, stand firm, act like men, be strong. When it said act like men, what it's talking about is you have to put the burden of your loved ones on your back, right? You have to be willing to say, listen, it's going to be all right because we're going to get through this, right? It's so many times as worldly men, as worldly males, that we find ourselves, I will say ourselves, because like I said, some of these worldly male traits I've seen, I'm lined up with them, and I don't like it myself. That's why this lesson is not only for everyone else to hear, but it's also for me myself. So at that worldly male, we find ourselves at times saying that, well, looking at aspects of what others are doing to hinder us, right? What are other people doing to hinder us? Instead of looking at, well, what are we doing to prosper ourselves. What are we doing to make ourselves prosper? I'm not talking about financial prosperity. We're talking about spiritual prosperity, right? Spiritual prosperity where we're looking to gain God's favor in the way we live. It talks about in 1 John chapter 1 and 9, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. The idea and the attitude of confessing sins is really about accepting and taking responsibility. That's what it's about. The spiritual man of God does that. He follows the mentality God has really set for us. But we also put that on our families, right? On our family aspect, we look at as a man, head of household, husband, right? We look at the husband, we look at things like that, and we say, we see so many times worldly males have the mentality of, I'm mad, I'm angry, and he just, he has the right to just storm through the house and have that angry presence. And peace is not there. And then you find the wife and the mother trying to find a way to smooth everything over. And she's finding a way to make the kids feel comfortable and make everybody in the house feel all right. And the whole time, sometimes she's neglecting her own peace because she's trying to keep peace for everybody else, because that man of the house is not exuding peace, right? He's exuding frustration. He's mad about everything, And this is sometimes what we find ourselves as worldly males. We find ourselves doing that. Versus when we look at 1 Peter, this gives us a great example of how men of God should be, because everything trickles down. So it says 1 Peter chapter 3, we're in verse 7. The husbands in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. So that's a big thing to me, right? It hinders your prayers if you are not exuding peace. As men of God, we have to exude peace, meaning we have to exude happiness when our family comes in. I remember something that really hurt me, just looking back, when I was preparing this lesson, something that hurt me to think about. I remember years ago, my son was probably in middle school, I think, maybe in middle school at the time. And, he comes home and we at the house and we're sitting there, and I don't know what was going on with me, but I remember him saying, "Dad, why are you looking like that? Why are you looking all mad? What's wrong?" He asked me this. And I was like, "Boy, man," I just kind of, it was so strange because it caught me off guard. He asked me that question, like, "Well, what's wrong with you?" I guess my face was looking angry or whatever, And I may have been having a self-pity party, because that's what worldly males do at times. And that's, for me, as a Christian, it's about spiritual growth. And I understand that, like I said, we all have these traits, unfortunately, right? And I can remember my son, when he asked me that question, I'm looking at it fast forward now, years later, I'm like, man, that's a cold thing. That's really cold, because you don't want your loved ones to ever have that impression, right? So for him to ask me something like that, it makes me understand, like, I was exuding the opposite of peace. And that's the wrong thing that we want as men of God. And it makes you understand, when you look years back, that, man, there's so many things that God, I prayed for that didn't happen. Well, why not? Well, it tells us right here. First of all, when it's talking about being considered with your wives, we have to understand, it's also talking about our children. It's also talking about our wives, our children, and our loved ones. This is what it's also talking about. Our wives, yes, our wives are partners that God put us with, that he joined us together with to go through this journey of life. And we're supposed to be a team, right? But that also goes out to our children. If our wives and our children see something in us that is not showing the example of God, we got to realize we got to do some changing. We got to do some changing here. It tells us, like I said, that verse is really powerful and it's really strong. It tells us how we're supposed to be. Be considerate. Think about them. Think about your spouse. Think about your children. Think about your family. We got to be that way. Because, like I said, as we'll go progress in this lesson, we'll see how it's a ripple effect. There is a ripple effect to this, to have the mentality of a worldly male. There's a ripple effect, and it affects people in a major way. We can't be one way, right, when we see and we meet and come together to worship. And then when it comes to our home lives as men, we can't be tyrants at our home. We literally have to be that same person that we show at church. At church, everybody wants to show, I'm the Christian guy. Hey, how you doing there, brother, sister? Hey, shake hands. We want to do that at church. But we got to be that way at home. The reason why we do it at church is because we want others to understand that we love the Lord and we're happy to be in the company of fellow Christians. But the same thing for our families, right? See, it starts at home. Focus on the family. That's what this lesson is about. It starts at home. If we are terror at home, when we at church smiling and grinning and shaking hands, well, ain't no shaking hands now, but traditionally, when we were shaking hands and greeting each other, all that back in the day, before this pandemic, we were setting an example to the people at church that that brother's a nice brother. That's a nice brother, nice man of God. We were giving that example. And then at home, it was a completely different situation. I want to give a quick story. Right? I want to tell a story about a family member. It's not my direct family, but he's a family member of my wife's side. And the man was at church all the time. You know, he was always in church and always, shaking hands. He was always greeting people, always a nice guy and good guy and all this. Everybody respected him at the church. He was so respectful and he was so kind and so loving and compassionate. But at home, he had stepchildren, right? He had stepchildren. He had married a woman with children. And, sweet woman, kind, loving, great, really loving, great woman. But she had children. Now, that's a whole nother part of this conversation. But she had children. He married her. Apparently, at the beginning, he accepted the fact that she had kids. And he married her and embraced them. But the problem was, he was not a spiritual man of God at home. Apparently, he was a tyrant at home. And apparently, he was such a tyrant that he put pressure so much on one individual relative of mine. And this guy was constantly getting pressure from this spiritual man of God that everybody saw. So at home, he's putting this pressure on the young man, on his stepson, putting pressure on him every day with something, every day just driving this wedge, every day stressing him, every day being a tyrant, until it got to the point where one day the young man couldn't take it anymore. And he got to a physical altercation, got way out of hand. And that brother, who was the spiritual man of God that everybody saw at church, he ended up losing his life because the young boy couldn't take it no more. Lost his life. And, and unfortunately, the young man is in prison to this day. This has happened several years ago, all right? And it's a sad situation because what people say is, oh, he was a good man. So he got character witnesses saying, well, he was a good man. He didn't deserve this. And listen, I'm not saying by any means someone deserves to be killed, right? But I'm just saying that the character witnesses only went off what they saw at church. That's all they knew. They saw the brother at church. It's a spiritual man of God. He's shaking hands. He's happy to meet everybody, greeting everybody. He's all this. But at home, he was a nightmare. And he terrorized one particular young man, his stepson. Terrorized him to the point where the boy, like I said, the boy out of character just lost it and took the man's life. It's a bad situation. But at the same time, this is exactly why this lesson I feel so important. Because being spiritual men of God cannot be in the church house doors. It has to carry over to our homes. It got to, right? It has to do it. It just has to carry over. Now we have to understand. So we're looking here. As a man of God, we must ensure our family knows that they are his most precious gift from God. Families got to know that. Our families got to know, right? Got to know that our loved ones are our most precious gift from God. Got to understand. It can't be something that's assumed. It has to be known. It has to be known. Our families are the most precious gift from God. Also, our wives are not our anger and frustration receptacle. I'm going to say that again. Our wives are not our anger and frustration receptacle. A trash receptacle where you throw trash at, you just throw, when you eat a burger from McDonald's, you ball that paper up and you throw it in there, and then one day you clean up some more trash off the counter, you throw it in the trash can, and then the trash gets full and you have to take it out. Our wives are not that wastebasket for our anger and our frustration. They are not meant to be sitting there and receiving all of our frustration. Listen, we can have a bad day at work, brothers, men. A bad day at work. We can have some bad things happen. But I'm going to tell you what a spiritual man of God had, the way he approaches a bad day. He's not coming home and just going to dump it all on his wife and his family because he had a bad day. Spiritual man of God is wanting to know how everyone else's day is going. He wants to know, how are you all coping? This is the example we got to set as spiritual man of God. Another point, I want to make sure we get to these points because like I said, it's two parts, and I want to break this up right. So we talk about spiritual men of God being satisfied. It's a big problem in the church. It's a big problem in Christian in churches everywhere. Spiritual men of God not being satisfied. Listen, brothers, we got to be satisfied, man. We got to be satisfied. And this lesson, like I said, is very important. And we got to, we ain't shying away from things here. I want to make sure we understand. This is not a lesson where we're going to be shying away from things. And I know it's a longer lesson, and I appreciate any one of you who take the time to watch this video. That's why I'm uploading, because you can actually watch it at work, and you can put your headphones in. You ain't got to see my face. You can hear my voice, all right? So I want us to turn to Proverbs. We're going to chapter 5, and we'll go to verse 18 through 19. So it says, may your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth, a loving doe, a graceful deer. May her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated with her love. Listen, brothers, let's get this understood, right? Too many Christian men, and I'm putting a quotation mark because we're Christian men. Too many Christian men find ourselves on the wrong side of being satisfied, right? Being satisfied, what God's perspective of it is, be satisfied with the wife of your youth, the woman that God blessed you with. Be satisfied with her, right? I don't care about the Beyoncés. I don't care about the Nicki Minaj's, the Cardi B's, all that. We have to understand, we have to be satisfied with the wife of our youth. That's one of the starting points of us being spiritual men of God, really, is being satisfied with the wife that God and the family that God blessed us with. We got to be satisfied with that. Yeah, so many, listen, we understand. This is how the world is, especially in this country. There's one man probably every 3 women. That's how it works. So there's beautiful women everywhere, man. Everywhere you look, brothers, there's beautiful girls, man, looking good and fine, all that. They on Instagram doing a new challenge every day, a new sexual type of challenge. Really, let's call it what it is. It's a sinful world we live in. So, they label these challenges and these sexual things they do as body positive. Listen, and I'm going to be honest, body positive does not involve you showing tons of skin. It's not how it works. Body positive should not involve you over-sexualizing yourself. And that's just a fact. But brothers, men of God, we have to understand the importance of being satisfied with who God blessed us with. Listen, it's not a sin to understand God has created beautiful human beings, right? It's not a sin. It's not sinful to understand that. But it is sinful for us to take that too far. Because not being satisfied causes too many men to wander away from God's idea of a family. All right, God's idea of a family does not involve you living a lie and deceiving your wife. It doesn't involve that. I'm sorry. We have a society now that comes up with all kind of new things, right? Where, now they have these things where, I've seen celebrities especially, where they put so much pressure on their wife. They say, hey, listen, we're going to be together, but I'm going to have some other woman I'm with too. And the wives say, okay. And I'm going to tell y'all, that's not acceptable, men. Not for men of God. It's not acceptable for us. The family does not include someone else. Right? It doesn't include that. God wants us to be satisfied with what we got. He wants us to be faithful to what we have, because we are to love our wives as Christ loved the church. That's an example. We have to realize that. We got to take that to heart and be serious with it, because, it's a matter of spiritual life and death, right? We read earlier in 1 Peter 3:7, how not doing right by our wives especially hinders our blessings. It literally hinders our prayers. So we got to understand the importance of doing right, especially. Now, one other aspect that I want to really focus on too is I want to focus on the aspect in Colossians. And I'm going to look at Colossians real quick, just trying to get a good understanding of what this is saying. Chapter 3, and we'll do verse 21. All right, 3 and 21. So it talks about instructions for a Christian household. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as it is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh to them. Children, obey your parents and everything, for this pleases the Lord. Now this, I'm sorry to say this. Unfortunately, see, being a worldly male is not something that many brothers do on purpose. I want to make sure we clarify that. Many brothers, at times when we find ourselves being worldly males, sometimes we're doing that because it's a tradition for the world we live in, for our society. Many times it's because of the world we live in. I look at myself. It's not about making excuses, but it's about facts. Because as Christians, we cannot take science and psychology out of the truth of different behaviors. We can't. We can't take science and psychology away. Sometimes as Christians, people try to do that, but you can't. You can't. I look at my father. My father was raised without a father. My grandmother worked herself to the bone. I mean, she did jobs that 10 men couldn't do in some aspects, right? She was just that much of a hardworking woman. My father didn't have a man in the house showing and teaching. My dad had to learn everything on the fly. Right? He had to learn how to be a husband and a father on the fly. He didn't have an instruction. He had no example. Well, his kids were blessed. We were blessed with that example. We were blessed to see what a father does. He works hard, takes care of his family. We were blessed to see those things. My dad didn't have that opportunity. So therefore, a lot of the my way or the highway mentality was a natural thing, because if you don't understand the concept from being shown the example, you pass that down. And I've seen myself so many times with my own family, my way or the highway type. And that's the wrong thing. That's the opposite of what God wants us to do. So when we look at this verse, on verse 20 of Colossians chapter 3, that's really where so many men of God stop. That verse is where men of God stop. Children, obey your parents and everything, for this please the Lord. That's it. Growing up, that's what most of us heard. We heard children, obey your parents. Boom, that was it. We didn't hear the verses before, and we sure didn't hear the verses after that. But the verses after that are essential to our growth and our salvation, because without verse 21, verse 20, 19, and 18 don't matter. Especially verse 20 doesn't matter. We can't tell our children, do right, obey your parents. We can't do that, but then deny what verse 21 says. Fathers, do not embitter your children or they will become discouraged. Listen, we got to understand that. That's what God is telling us. Spiritual men, we got to understand that, and we got to live that. Do not embitter your children. This is the NIV. We cannot provoke our children to anger. That's against God. You see, it's no situation where we get to be worldly males and Christians at the same time. We can't be both. That worldly male we talked about earlier, he don't take responsibility. He's not accountable for his actions. So therefore, that is the doctrine he's going to preach. He's going to preach that doctrine. Children, obey your parents. He's not going to preach a doctrine that puts pressure on himself. He's not going to preach a doctrine that tells him to avoid embittering his children. We got to be careful, and we got to watch that. Okay, we got to watch that, brothers. So I want to conclude with some little points I made. Avoid us being the embodiment of these negative male stereotypes. My list is out, and I'm going to include it. It's a long video, and I appreciate those of you who have to take the time to watch this and listen to it. I encourage you all to listen to this at work. That's what I encourage you to do, really. Turn it on, put the phone down, and just listen, because hopefully this helps. Because sometimes, at work, you ain't got time to watch no video, but hopefully I can listen to this. All right, these are the points I want to make, and then we're going to conclude. Boys, we got to avoid these negative male stereotypes, right? These toxic male stereotypes as men of God. Boys will be boys mentality. We got to throw it out. Spiritual men of God, ain't no such thing as boys will be boys, right? Boys will be boys is the justification for bad behavior. Period. Throw it out. After hard days of work, give me a cold drink and leave me alone. Throw that away. That is not a spiritual man of God. That's not. That's the opposite. Throw it away. All right. What about what I need? Throw it away. We got to throw that away too. Yes, we have needs. Of course we do. But it's not all about us. It is not all about us. We got to remember that. Not all about us. Expecting perfection. Listen, ladies, I'm going to speak to you, ladies, sisters. If Jay-Z cheated on Beyonce, if Eric Benet, he's a famous R&B singer for some of y'all who are too young, Eric Benet cheated on Halle Berry, I want you all to understand something. There is nothing you can do. You're not going to, unless you're a multi-millionaire like Beyonce and Halle Berry, you can't match their fly. You don't have the money that they got. You can't match the makeup contracts. You can't match all the things they got to look near perfect, right? So it ain't about your looks. It's about being a toxic, worldly male. Don't think you can do anything to make a man who ain't going to do right. You can't. Beyonce, Halle Berry couldn't. And Halle Berry, at one point, was the baddest in the game. If she can't, ladies, give up on thinking that's something you can do. It's not about you. It's about what God is doing inside of that man. Let's make sure we understand that. All right. Not taking responsibility for our actions. That's another thing. Brothers, we got to get rid of that too. Take responsibility. We got to step it up. Being guarded with our feelings. Hey, men don't talk about their feelings. Get rid of that. Throw it out. That's a toxic male trait that we can no longer have. We can't pass that on to our children. I'm very proud that my son can actually say, my dad is not afraid to express his feelings. My dad is not afraid to kiss me, hug me, and tell me it's going to be okay. I ain't afraid of that. My dad was he's an old school man. That's how he raised. He wasn't raised about expressing his feelings and being emotional. I thank God he's at the point now, and as a grandfather, that he's able to be more in touch with his emotional side. But that's not something I was raised with, because that wasn't how people did things. Lastly, not knowing we've gone too far. Brothers, we got to get this understood. We got to know when we're going too far. We cannot continue to go too far. We got to know when to stop. Know when enough is enough. Don't have our wives jumping in between us. Don't have our wives jumping in between us, trying to break up us in our altercation or confrontation with our children or with other people. Listen, we got to know when we've gone too far. Spiritual men of God, we got to be that, and we got to live that. Stop it. And stop it. And stop that nonsense. Men ain't got to be aggressive. Men ain't got to be violent. Men ain't got to be emotionally reserved and held back. That's in all that. That's negative traits that make us exactly what that worldly male is. All right, I thank y'all so much, brothers and sisters, for listening. I'm really glad we got through this first session like this. I know it's a long video. Like I said, please just listen to it when you get a chance versus watching it. It may be more difficult for some of y'all to do. Thank y'all so much for listening. We ask God to bless each and every one of you. I always, I believe in speaking it, because words are power. God wants God to bless every one of you. I want God to touch our lives, because I understand that it's important for us to get that spiritual boost. We need it, right? Because some of us are going through a lot of things, silent battles, right? In our families, right? In our marriages, at our jobs. We got to understand, we need a spiritual boost. Every one of us do. That spiritual boost comes from God. Put our trust in him. And I pray that God does that for each and every one of you all. You're not alone. So understand you're not going through this battle alone. God is with you. And trust and believe that. And he will make a way. He always gives us a way. All right, believe that. Thank y'all so much. God bless each and every one of you. I'll have a great rest of y'all week.